Hi everyone, I'm Brandon Paints, and this video was created in partnership with onepagerules, Chronicle RPG, and Two Thin Coats by Trans Atlantis Games. In this video, we will paint Captain Lucrezza, a model from Secrets of Tixal, a Frontiers campaign from onepagerules. You can get this model by pledging to the $10 tier, which gets you a narrative campaign and 5 exclusive models. There are also other tiers that give you a full army of Saurians or Duchies of Vinci, so be sure to check those out too. The paints that we will use are from the Duchies of Vinci set from Two Thin Coats, in addition to a few extra paints from the Two Thin Coats paint range. We will also be using the Sables Kolinsky brushes from Chronicle RPG to paint this model. First, we will prime the model. I'm using dark warm gray from Monument Hobbies through my airbrush, but any spray primer is fine too. I recommend sticking to a gray tone so that you can easily go brighter or darker in the following steps. Now that our model is primed, we will apply all of the base coat colors before moving on to any other steps like washes or highlights. This will help us ensure that our colors work well together before we get too far into the painting process. The first color we will start with is Royal Cloak. As we base coat the model, we need to make sure that our paint is thinned with a little bit of water so that there is no texture while we are painting the model. This also means that we will need to apply multiple coats of paint to achieve full opacity of each color. It is also important to let each coat of paint fully dry before applying another layer on top of it. It is also worth noting that for these base coat steps, I use a size 2 or 3 brush, depending on the size of the area that I am base coating. This helps speed up the process quite a bit. Once we finish base coating the cloak on this model, we will move on to the armor, where we will use Skeleton Legion. Do not worry too much about being very precise while you paint during this step. We can always go back and tidy things up. Usually, I wait until all base coats are done to tidy up any areas. Otherwise, I might make another mistake on an area that I just fixed, and that can be pretty frustrating. If this is your first time using Two Thin Coats paint, you might notice that the coverage is really good compared to some other paints, even on the first layer. The range of paint is very consistent in this way, which will really help us speed up our painting time. Now that our armor is base coated, we will start on all of the brown areas of the model, like the boots, gloves, and other assorted things. For these sections, we will use cuirass leather as our base coat. If you liked this video, it would mean a lot to me if you took the time to subscribe or leave a comment or even a like below. This is my first time creating a painting tutorial like this, so if you want to see more, that's the best way to let me know. With all of our brown sections complete, we can now move on to the skin of the model. In the concept art, Captain Lucrezza has a darker skin tone, So we will start with a base coat of barred skin. The next base coat that we will do is all of the white areas, but instead of using Trooper White, we will be using Carcharodon Gray, which is a very light gray. This will help our white pop a little bit more when we add a highlight of Trooper White on top. It is also worth pointing out that when applying Carcharodon Gray to these stripes, I'm picking the stripes that are pushed further into the model rather than the raised ones. This means that I don't have to worry about being messy and getting any color onto those raised stripes. Now that the white is base coated, we will base coat the hair with Doom Death Black. I decided to paint the sculpted hair, but I also decided to paint the back and sides of their head to add in a hairline where the sculpt is flat. That last part is entirely optional, but I think it really does help the hair look more realistic. If you make a mistake with the hairline, you can always go back in with barred skin and clean up from the opposite direction. Now that the hair is base coated, we can start adding colors to the smaller areas of the model. First, we will use Royal Cloak on some of the stripes on the model. We should be careful as we apply this color and try to avoid getting it into any of the white areas. But if you do, just cover over it with more Carcharodon Gray and you should be fine. Next, we will follow the same exact step, but this time we will use Marine Blue on the remaining stripes on the model. Once all of the Royal Cloak and Marine Blue has been applied, I will go back in with Carcharodon Gray and tidy up any mistakes that I made. To paint the ribbon on the captain's chest, I first used a stripe of Carcharodon Gray down the middle, then used Marine Blue on each side to straighten up the stripe. If you make a mistake with the blue, just use Carcharodon Gray again until you get it right. It might take a few tries. For the tassel on the sword, I used barred skin as my base coat. I decided to use this color because it's one that isn't really used much on the model. Now that all of the non-metallic base coats are complete, we can move on to base coats that use metallic paint. The first one that we will use is Surcoat's Silver, which we will apply to all silver areas of the model. Personally, anytime I use metallic paint, I use a different brush and a different water cup. This will help avoid any contamination of metallic flakes getting into your regular paint. As we continue to paint these base coats, I just wanted to give you a quick reminder to check out the Secrets of Tixal Frontiers campaign over on my mini factory. The link will be down below in the description. These models have a lot of character, which makes them really fun to paint, and you really don't want to miss out on that. The silver base coat is complete, so now we can move on to all of the areas of gold. For these sections, we will use Dragon's Gold. Okay, so earlier I lied. The silver wasn't done. We will continue to use Surcoat silver on small details and also on things like the captain's bird. Now, we will use Dragon's Gold to pick out all of the raised details of this symbol on the captain's chest. And with that step done, the base coats are now complete. Now that the base coats are finished, we can do one of the most fun steps, adding washes to the model. The first wash that we will use is the Battle Mud Wash. We will be applying it to every area of the model, except for the silver areas. If you've never used washes from Too Thin Coats, it's important to know that their washes dry very fast. This will help us finish our paint job faster, but it also means that we need to make sure that we are using lots of wash in our brush to help make sure that it does not dry too soon. If you do not put enough wash on your brush and use the amount that you might use for something like a glaze, you will end up with something called tidal marks, which is when you can see a darker ring of color around the area where the wash dries. By using a large quantity of wash, we will slow the drying time and avoid these tidal marks. Just be careful that you do not pool the wash into the recessed areas. If this happens to you, just take a damp brush and stick it into the pool of wash so that it soaks up any excess. If you end up getting any Battle Mud Wash onto the silver by accident, you can either just leave it or take a damp brush from before and soak up any of the wash that got onto the wrong area. Now that the Battle Mud Wash is complete, we will wash the silver areas with Oblivion Black Wash. We need to make sure that we load our paintbrush with plenty of water, just like when we were using the Battle Mud Wash before. And just like that, the wash step is complete. You could stop here and have a good looking army, but we're going to push further and add highlights to our model. First, we will focus on the cape. We will begin by using Royal Cloak, just to get more color back into the raised areas of the cape where the wash kind of darkened it a little bit. We will focus on any edges that we see, but we will also focus on any surfaces that are facing up. In other words, the areas where the light would naturally hit the cape. This will take a few coats of paint before moving on to the next step of the highlight. Next, we will use a highlight of Sword Hilt Burgundy, and we will apply this highlight in smaller sections on the cape. We will try to make these highlights thinner at any edges, and when we're highlighting a surface, we want to make sure that this layer reaches closer to the top and the edges of the cape where the light will hit it more directly. You should be able to see some royal cloak around this highlight. We don't want to cover that entirely. As with the previous highlight color, this one might take a few coats to get it opaque. After this highlight of sword hilt burgundy, we will apply a final highlight that is made up of a mix of sword hilt burgundy and glistening gums. The mix was made of roughly equal parts, but do not get caught up on any exact ratios. As long as it's close, that's what's important. We will make these highlights even smaller than the ones before, really focusing on the areas where the light will hit the model most directly. After that final highlight is complete, we will use a bit of pure sword hilt burgundy and reintroduce it into some areas as a mid-tone. This will help bring some color back into the cape. Now that the cape is complete, we can start on the armor again. We will start highlighting with Skeleton Legion, and we will follow similar rules as we did on the cape. However, the armor has many more edges to consider. Just like before, each highlight layer will take 2 to 3 coats of paint, so please be patient and make sure each coat of paint dries before applying the next one. If you make a mistake and get a highlight layer into an area where the wash or another color should be, don't worry too much. If you can, try to wick away the paint with a damp brush before it dries. Then, anything that's left, just cover over it with the base color that belongs there, and if needed, reapply the wash in that section. Now that we've added our first highlight of Skeleton Legion, we can do the next highlight with Vampire Fang. As before, with this step, we want to make sure that we use smaller sections of Vampire Fang where the light will hit most directly, and leave some of the Skeleton Legion showing around it. For now, the armor is complete. Unfortunately, the footage where we highlight one final layer on the armor is lost, and for that, we will use Vampire Fang mixed equally with Ivory Tusk. You will see how that looks at the end of the video, and we followed the same strategies that we used on the cape with that final highlight too. Now we can move on to the white sections, where we will add a highlight of Carcharodon Gray. Next, we will move on to the blue sections, where we will use marine blue to highlight any edges and raised areas on the model. With that step done, we will then use Elysium blue to add smaller highlights in raised areas and edges. We need to make sure that we still have some marine blue showing around it, just like with the other colors. After completing the blue, we will highlight the sword tassel with bard skin. Then we will add a final smaller highlight using a mix of equal parts of ivory tusk and bard skin. The next step is to highlight the face. First, we highlighted it with bard skin, focusing on the raised areas and avoiding any shadows. After this, we will add a highlight that is an equal mix of dwarven skin and bard skin. With this mix, we will focus on picking out the brightest sections of the skin where the light would hit it most directly. Finally, we will apply a thin glaze of sword hilt burgundy to the skin. With the skin complete, now we can move on to the brown sections. First, we will apply a highlight layer of cuirass leather. This will be our largest highlight on the color, so it should be on all raised areas and edges. Now we will apply a final highlight to the brown areas with Noble Steed Brown. We will focus these highlights to be smaller than the previous ones, and also make sure that they are closer to the edges and raised areas where the light would hit more directly. All of the non-metallic highlights are now complete, so now it's time to move on to the metallic paints. Don't forget to change your paintbrush and your water cup in order to avoid any contamination of metal flakes into your regular paint. The first metallic section that we will highlight is all of the silver areas. We will use Surcoat Silver to apply the first highlight to these sections. Make sure to hit all of the raised areas and edges where the light would hit the model. I'd like to take a moment to say thanks to those of you who might have taken time during this video to subscribe to my channel or leave a comment or like on the video. It means a lot. Now that the first silver highlight is complete, we will use Mithril Blade to add a final highlight to our silver areas. We will make sure that this highlight is smaller than the first one and only focused on areas and edges where the light will hit most directly. We should still see the previous highlight around it. The silver is complete, so now we will highlight the gold. We will start by highlighting the gold with Dragon's Gold, focusing on large raised areas and edges, and leaving our wash in the shadows. Now we're on the final highlight of the model. For this highlight, we will use an equal mix of Mithril Blade and Dragon's Gold. We will only apply it to small areas and edges where the light will hit most directly. And there we have it. Captain Lucrezza is complete. I hope that you found this tutorial helpful and that you had fun following along in the process. If you try your hand at this tutorial, please feel free to share your work with me over on Instagram at brandon.paints. I would love to see how it turned out. Remember, if you would like to get this model for yourself, you can download it right now over at the Secrets of Tixal Frontiers campaign on My Mini Factory. I would like to give a huge thank you to onepagerules, Chronicle RPG, and Trans Atlantis Games for supplying the model, the brushes, and the paints used in this video. And finally, a big thank you to the viewers for giving this video a chance. I hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, bye bye.